Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. And in this episode, we've got an awesome guest whose energy is infectious when it comes to business and entrepreneurship. She's not only one of us, but she has an awesome business when it comes to really innovating within the tech space. So we're going to hear it all from her words. But just to give you a little bit of a background on today's guest, her name is Jackie French. Jackie is the founder and CEO of SocialGrid and Social Cyber Lab. Previously, Jackie led projects at KPMG and Booz Hamilton covering cyber and cloud technologies. Words that we hear a lot out of the tech space, but we may not understand, and we for sure don't understand to the depths that Jackie does. With her background in both public and private sector technologies, Jackie brings a holistic approach to addressing complex cybersecurity challenges. Jackie holds a master's degree from Johns Hopkins University, where she focused on intellectual property protections under free trade agreements. Now, Jackie and I have flipped coasts. She is originally from Naples, Florida. She is now based in my good old New England. She's up in New Hampshire. Jackie enjoys all things having to do with the ocean and so much that we're going to hear from her about her business here today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Jackie French. All right, Jackie, I am so excited that you're here. It's way warmer for me than it is for you today, but welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I miss the warmth, but it's great to be in New England.
Heck yeah. It's funny. You actually said before we hit record that you're a runner and you like running in the cold. My excuse during soccer off season, which was in the winter, is I always used to tell my coach, I was like, the cold weather goes straight to my lungs. I can't breathe.
I did experience that the first time I ran in the cold, but once I finished my run, and I get hot when I run, at the end, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's 30 degrees and you cool down immediately. I'm a huge fan. I love it.
I don't get it, Jackie, but I think it explains you're obviously tougher than me. Having gone through cyber attacks firsthand, these are your defenses on display in both life and in business. So let's take listeners beyond the bio. Obviously, I told them a little bit about your professional background, but give us the short version of your story of how the heck did you get into all these awesome things you're doing now with your own company? What led you to here?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Naples, Florida, as you mentioned. And once I had graduated and gone to college in Tampa, where we traded places, I studied international business. And while I was at the University of Tampa, I spent some time at the Department of Commerce interning there and learning about intellectual property protections. And so this isn't the sexiest topic, but I took a big interest in it because it was right at the intersection of trade at that point in time. It was when the administration during that year was pushing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a big trade agreement. And there was a lot of activity there that just made it super fascinating when it came to international relations and geopolitics and business and pharmaceuticals and all kinds of just really big, meaty areas where you can solve big problems. And so that led me to taking on an internship in Washington, D.C. at the Office of the United States Trade Representative, where I also worked on intellectual property protections there as well, and really learned what the stakes are when you're negotiating at international levels. And I also learned the key sectors that really played a large role in ensuring that the innovations that U.S. citizens come up with today are protected, and also that they are shared around the world in a way that is helpful to the communities they're trying to bring new innovations to. And so once I had completed my internship at USTR, I did a brief stint at an intellectual property firm where I was focused on becoming a lawyer, but then the tech world sucked me in, and I started at a little startup that focused on federal acquisitions with a really great team there, which is where I got my hands dirty for the first time with tech. Just on the ground, working with engineers, figuring out ways to come up with innovative solutions for the government. And from there, I went to Booz Hamilton, and that's where I got to work for the first time with large teams, great teams who I just recently had drinks with the other week. That's the great thing about working at Booz Allen, and learned how to really manage very large scale IT projects. And then from there, I went to KPMG and worked in a variety of different areas of strategy consulting and just got to really better understand emerging technologies. And so in technology, you'll kind of see a lot of us who work in emerging tech, we kind of have this path where we go from cloud to some kind of emerging area, and then usually to AI. I pretty much did that track and have continued forward with it. But the one underlying theme across all those areas is cyber. And as things have evolved into the current state of affairs today, there's a lot of intersections between intellectual property, international business, geopolitics, technology, emerging technologies that have led to me founding what is today SocialGrid. And I have seen firsthand how the cyber strategies today really do not account for the critical elements of human interaction. And so cyber attacks today, such as the recent MGM attack that happened over the last several months, where a 10-minute phone call resulted in a $100 million fee for MGM, illustrate the need for new cybersecurity approaches. And so SocialGrid addresses that gap by delivering intelligent workflows to cyber and tech teams to enhance operational efficiencies. And so our AI-powered tool dramatically reduces cost, it boosts existing security measures, and it also significantly refines operations. And so that is what SocialGrid is focused on, and we're very excited to be moving forward with a great team to bring an innovative tool to this space.
Yeah, Jackie, I love that overview for so many reasons, but probably chief of those reasons is that these are things that we always hear about in the news, as we always hear, and obviously so many of the words that you're talking about, intellectual property protection and cyber attacks, we always hear these things, but I guess as end consumers, we kind of take it all for granted that things just seem to work for us. And in those examples where the MGM attack, for example, it's just something that we hear on the news. A lot of these cyber attacks, we get an email that says, oops, all of your data was taken, and it is what it is, and we move on, and we trust the systems, whatever that system that we believe it is, we trust that that will take care of itself. Talk to us about the intricacies of it, because us as consumers, it does feel hopeless in so many cases, and especially it's fun for us because we're not only talking as consumers today, we're talking as entrepreneurs, as business owners. We may not take these things as seriously as they are because there's incredible people like you at the forefront of fighting this stuff. Talk to us about cyber attacks. Why the heck do we care about this? Why is this so important, both at the big business level? Obviously, those are the high visibility ones that we hear about on the news, as well as the small business level.
Absolutely. And I really want to touch on the small business level too, because I know that's something that is so critical to this community we're speaking to. And I grew up in a family that runs multiple small businesses. My parents founded their company when I was born. And so I really grew up in an entrepreneurial setting. And I think it's very important that we can provide tools that are secure for small businesses and startups. And so I've been reaching out to the startup community to share what we're doing as we kind of work through these problem sets that we've received from customers for big problems that we can solve. But we're getting to the heart of kind of all of this really interesting areas that intersect. And the key thing here that I'll mention is 81% of organizations today are integrating their cyber and tech operations. And this is for the reasons I just mentioned a moment ago for why we founded SocialGrid. And SocialGrid is not just focused on the cost reduction aspect of why companies are integrating these operations, but we're also focused on a paradigm shift where people are put at the center of operations. And so I'm going to get into that a little bit. But really what's important there is through providing innovative solutions like what SocialGrid is doing, we're enabling organizations to cultivate organizational resilience. And resilience is so important right now as we have hundreds and thousands of workers working remotely. We just came out of a pandemic. We have the advent of AI. So a lot is changing in the world that we live in today. And then even more importantly, solutions like SocialGrid can really offer an opportunity to unlock untapped talent and unleash the power of cyber and tech teams who can work as one cohesive unit. So not only are you cultivating resilience, but you're really bringing together the complex components of what were before siloed teams and putting them in a really simplified way so that people can work more efficiently and be more aware of evolving threat landscapes, which are going to only become more complex with AI, as many of us know. And so with consumers in general, there is a lot of great work that the current administration has done when it comes to providing solutions that are secure. So if you read the news today and you just look up cybersecurity, secure by design, you'll see that the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or as we like to call them, CISA, because in the government realm, we love acronyms. They are really pushing secure by design. And so they're asking for companies to build tools that do not put the responsibility of security onto the consumer. And that's so fantastic because consumers, not everybody needs to know the intricacies of a very complex IT system in order to be able to know how to protect themselves. And so a lot of the systems that we use today are already using AI. If you use, video streaming services, I won't provide any names. It could be really any of them. They use algorithms to determine what your preferences are when you use those services. And so AI is tracking your preferences, and I'm sure many of us have heard about this, but when that becomes important is when they have your personal information, and that can start being used in ways that are both good and bad. So the good side is that maybe you get advertisements that are very helpful to you. But the bad side of that is that there could be bad actors who then use that to social engineer, trying to get you to pay for something that is a fraudulent payment. And so those are some of the examples of what goes on. But the secure by design approaches that the government is really pushing is very important. And it's something that we've taken seriously as a startup. And this is something I've been talking to the startup community about, is using solutions that start with security at the beginning. I've been on many teams where we're building complex systems and tools that it's challenging to have security at the beginning, but finding ways to do so that are innovative, efficient, creative, really can make the difference for building products that are secure by design. And so the first thing we did with SocialGrid when we got it off the ground is we made sure if we had users logging in, some kind of feature like that, we would have two-factor authentication, which ensures that you're signing in with a password and then with some other type of identification to approve that it's you. And then we've also made sure that we're using databases that are meeting industry standard security measures. And so this is, in today's world with AI, this is very easy to do in the startup community. And it's something that I've been recommending to other founders. And it's something that is core to the regulations that are coming out, to the policies that are coming out when it comes to innovating and building new products and tools. The other piece of that I will mention is there is just a new trust verification that the government came out with to identify different tools that are built securely and have been approved by the government as secure. And so I'm really excited to see how that goes and how it's used across the technology community and how consumers can learn more about how they're being protected. Right now in the United States, when it comes to privacy, most of our laws are at the state level. And so New York has been one of the first states to come out with some kind of oversight into AI and how it impacts consumers. And I'm looking forward to seeing other approaches toward protecting consumers. And when we are building our tools at SocialGrid, since we're focused on cyber, consumers, customers, users are top of mind. That's all we think about every day. We're very customer research driven.
Yeah, Jackie, it's fun having this conversation with you when we are, because here we are at the beginning of 2024, and it feels like so many things are changing within the tech space. And in particular, I think that one thing that sounds really unique coming from you is that you're someone who's in such a technology-driven industry, but so frequently, even hearing you talk about it, going to your business website, even in my research beforehand, it seems so much of your emphasis is on the humans, the people behind all of these things. And when we talk about cyber attacks, how frequently do we think of pop culture? We see those hackers in movies. It's a bunch of ones and zeros on the screen. But I mean, you talk about it so much. For example, in your questionnaire before we even hopped on today, you said that all this stuff allowed me to see that today's cyber strategies completely ignore organizations' most vulnerable assets, their employees. Here in your answers today, you've talked about putting people at the center of operations, bringing out the talent throughout different teams. Talk to us about that human element and why leveraging good technology obviously allows us to better serve and better position the humans behind all these things that are happening everywhere in day-to-day life.
Yes, so I'll flip the coin to your question from before, where we were focused on the consumers. Now I will focus on the tech teams behind the tools that are built for consumers. And with the cybersecurity teams I've worked with, there is not a single team I've worked with that does not just work their tails off. They are overburdened. They are dealing with different threat actors, different threat landscapes. They are constantly thinking through ways to protect the organizations and the people that they're focused on protecting. And when it comes to the human element of that, SocialGrid is not just focused on the consumer community. We're also focused on the cybersecurity and technology professionals who really have to fight off all of these attacks. And for those who have never kind of been behind the scenes with these teams, when a cyber incident happens, it is all hands on deck. And you can have the most streamlined, efficient operation, but if some kind of new threat enters the scene, you really have to have a team who knows how to work together. I've always kind of thought of it like a soccer match or a football game where your team has to know who to pass the ball to. And so on a lot of the teams I've worked on, we do what are called tabletop exercises. And that's really where you can identify people by their roles, by their expertise, and go through potential incidents that could occur and determine what the team would do in that type of a situation. And so with tools like what SocialGrid is building, teams are provided with information faster, more accurate, and more relevant to the roles they're serving in, and then also to the organizations they're serving. And this is really important because in the cybersecurity community, we hear a lot about burnout, and we hear a lot about finding ways to kind of find resilience in our roles and in our jobs with all of the things that are going on in cybersecurity today. And so the hope with these tools that are very human-centered is to provide that resilience, not just at an organizational level, but at an individual level for the folks who are protecting the organizations and the people who are building these really cool, innovative tools today. And so we've had a very major focus on Chief Information Security Officers, or CISOs, who lead these teams. We've been very focused on the technology teams. There's so much great knowledge and expertise that all of them bring to the table. And we just want to find ways to break down silos that tend to occur within in the technology world when you're building just really innovative, new, exciting stuff. And so having tools that can give you the agility to move forward while also understanding the human element of it makes an entire difference, and it helps teams work better together. But the more important part of that is, even with those tools, having the human focus is very important for also sometimes deciding when you don't need a tool between people. At the beginning, I mentioned that a lot of today's cyber strategies do not account for the very crucial element of human interaction. And we think about that a lot with how we build our tools. The tools should not get in the center of communication between a technology team, a cybersecurity team and its executives and their general organization. And so thinking through when it's better to have a human-to-human conversation, and then when it's better to have a human-to-tech conversation, or if tech is serving as a third party to two humans, is really important. And it's something that we're hoping to kind of refine and finesse over time. But this human element of being able to remain resilient throughout different cybersecurity incidents is critical to the cybersecurity community, because now I'm going to speak to talent. We really need more talent in this sector, and teams are understaffed. Universities are catching up to what folks need to know when it comes to technical backgrounds, when it comes to all kinds of backgrounds. Really, we really need them all in cyber, whether it's international relations, technology, mathematics, all of it, STEM, arts. And we need to bring more people into the fold so that we can build that talent pool and start bringing people into these critical areas where we need that help. And so we're working with different universities, and we've been looking at different partnerships for organizations who may be able to provide that kind of training. And going back to your original point, the human element, it's threaded throughout all of this, and it's so integral to everything that we do. And most of the people on our team have experienced cyber attacks firsthand, whether it's with clients or individually. And so that really has molded our company philosophy to have that approach.
Yeah, Jackie, gosh, we are talking about cybersecurity and you dropped a soccer analogy on us here in today's episode. That makes me absolutely excited. If there's one thing that I love more than soccer, it's probably entrepreneurship. And that's why talking to you not only as a cybersecurity expert and obviously as the founder of your own company, it's fun on an entrepreneurial level to really pick that brain as well, because listeners know that one of the things we always ask our guests is about your zone of genius. And you have 3 zones of genius that you dropped on us. I want to pick on the first one right here because I absolutely love it from an entrepreneurial perspective, is having courage to solve big problems. Now, Jackie, a lot of people might be listening to this and thinking, holy cow, we're talking about big cloud, big. I mean, you've talked about, I really love the intersection that you painted for us here today of government, international business, consumers, employees, all of these different facets of what cybersecurity touches and for sure what it impacts. And with that said, you, Jackie, have decided, you know what? I'm not just going to become an expert in my field and work in different roles throughout this industry, but I'm going to start my company. And obviously you started SocialGrid. I'm so excited for listeners to see your website, which we'll talk about at the end of this episode. But with that in mind, take us through that journey of when you actually sat down and you said, you know what? I want to be part of the solution in a problem that is not only big today, it's going to only become bigger in the future. Jackie, what got you into that? Because it does take a lot of bravery and courage and a lot of the unknown, but walk us through it.
This is why I was so excited to talk to you today, because it's just so great. Once you become an entrepreneur, the community is just so great and so tight-knit, and it's something that sticks with you for life. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about entrepreneurship, and it's so exciting. And it has taken me some time to get to the point where I was willing to go off and build my own company. I probably thought about it for at least 7 years and then really got serious about it over the last 3 to 5 years. And everybody really has their own journey. When it comes to my journey, the tech sector was something I was always interested in. And when I was an undergraduate, I didn't really understand what that meant. I was building websites and coding, but I didn't understand you could be paid for that and be able to build a career in that. And once I understood that, I wanted to build my expertise in technology. And so I focused on that once I graduated, and I worked for different companies, worked with different teams. And I really enjoyed that process of learning how to not only build technology, but to think about it. And building is, for me, so much fun. I like to build things, and I come from a family who builds things. We have run construction companies, tile companies, and we've always had a very big focus on the craft of doing something, having a craft about how you approach something and making sure you do it to the best of your ability, whatever it is. And so when I was working in technology, I really saw a shift in 2020, 2021, when the pandemic hit and folks went remote, where the cybersecurity landscape had changed. And there were attacks that I had seen previously that I worked with clients to protect them from. And what really changed for me was seeing the landscape evolve to incorporate emerging technologies in a way I hadn't seen before, especially with AI. And that really served as a call to action for me. And I heard a great saying from one of the accelerators recently that some folks start companies because they have a goal to make money. Some folks start companies because they have this kind of activist mentality where there's a really big problem they need to solve. And some folks start companies because they just want to solve a very, very specific niche problem and an area that requires a specific kind of expertise. And I kind of like that lay of the land. And I think any reason is really fine. If I had to put myself in one of the categories, it would be more of an activist approach. I am on a mission to solve the neglect of human interaction incorporated throughout cybersecurity tools. And that's simply because I have had to deal with so many attacks with my clients, and then also being attacked individually, where there were so many questions that I just could not answer and did not have any guidance or resources for. And I was working in cyber, so I can't even imagine what it's like if you're not working in cyber. I didn't even know how to identify at the beginning that I had been attacked. I did not know how to label it or how to define it. I did not know how to report anything. I didn't know how to reach out to resources. And I certainly didn't even have the time to think about what it meant from a human perspective. And so once I had a few years down the road really thought through everything I had seen with my clients, everything I had dealt with firsthand, I really thought to myself, we have AI coming around, things are changing, and if there's going to be a change in this sector, now is the time. And that's when I decided to really spin off and work on helping with this big problem. And going back to zone of genius, which I really love that term, and going back to solving big problems, it takes courage to solve big problems, because it's not easy. It's actually quite painful, and I think it's not talked about enough how important it is to have the courage to solve big problems, especially when there's so many people around in these areas who are just incredibly intelligent and who have just incredible insights. And I remember when I first started in intellectual property and I was learning about it and I had just graduated from undergrad, it was intimidating. I remember thinking to myself, wow, is this a place where I belong? Is this a place where I can contribute to things? And over time, as I learned about technology and I learned about the sector, I grew that confidence to really feel as though there was something I can contribute and can help with solving these big problems. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, I think it's better to set your sights on a very, very big problem so that if you can't solve all the problems, you can at least, reach for the stars, land on a cloud. You can solve one of the problems. And that way you never have to worry about where you're pivoting. And that's been a key thread throughout SocialGrid. We're very new, but one thing we've been able to do from the beginning is move between and pivot between how to solve different problems in really creative and innovative ways. And so by having a big problem approach, it really helps to give yourself the room to pivot to different areas. And going back to my background with my family running their own businesses, I was a first-gen college student and never really had a predefined path for myself. I think as a kid, I wanted to be a professional snowboarder, and I was dead set on doing that. And because I didn't have that predefined path, I've always felt very comfortable entering spaces to try new things where maybe, they're disparate areas that don't really connect. And so have the courage to take on the big problem and, with the pain, move through it and just find ways to pivot when there's areas where maybe it's not the right problem to solve at a certain time.
Yeah, Jackie, I love hearing the way you talk about entrepreneurship and articulate your own motives as an entrepreneur, because I think for listeners, every single one of you'll find so much inspiration in Jackie's own story there. What really cries out to me is be the change you wish to see in the world. If you're looking at things, whether that means you're sitting at your cubicle, you're sitting at your 9-to-5 job and you're saying, gosh, this should change. Let Jackie's story be a beacon of light and inspiration for you to say, look, here's somebody else in real life actually doing this. And heck, it just so happens that Jackie's doing it in a huge industry that is incredibly important societally as well. This is a huge problem that society, not even nationwide, across the entire globe is facing. And Jackie is at the forefront of creating incredible technologies to do that. Jackie, I knew that time was going to fly by today. Even before we hit record today, I knew that you and I would have no shortage of things to talk about. But I want to squeeze in 2 final questions for you. And the first one is mainly because you dropped my 2024 word of the year, which is building. Listeners know about how excited I am about that word being really a beacon of what my year is going to look like. And I mean that as both the verb and the noun. You mentioned construction projects. We had John Gresco on at the end of 2023, who's an architect based in Southern California. And he talked about how much we take for granted when we see buildings. Buildings are intentional. Buildings are structures that withstand the test of time, withstand, forces of wind. I'm here in Florida, hurricanes, all of that. And so I love that you identify as a builder. Your family is a family of builders in so many different ways. And I think part of that is really understanding. It's, again, I'm going to pick on your zone of genius because I love the way you articulate these things, is that one of your zones of genius, you wrote moving quickly and conscientiously between the big picture and more tactical efforts. And Jackie, with building being the thing that I'm cognizant of and noticing here in 2024, I can't help but notice it is that zoom between the big picture, the small picture, and knowing how to adjust between the two. With your entrepreneurial hat on, as someone who's building an incredible business in the technology space, someone who's managing a team, someone who's managing clients, what is that shift for you? How do you manage to get that balance right?
That is a great question. And I'm going to go back to sports because I loved sports as a kid. So for those of you listening, if any of you are climbers, I learned how to boulder probably in 2016 or 2017. And that is the closest sport I could identify with when it comes to moving from the big picture to the small picture as an entrepreneur. And the reason for that is when you're bouldering, and for those of you who don't know what bouldering is, it's where you climb rocks, but without a rope. A rope is belaying. And so when I'm bouldering, you have to take each of the different kinds of paths that to get to the top of the wall in different ways. There's no one right way to do it. And so in the boulder community, folks really sit around and watch everybody and how they climb to learn different ways to solve a problem. And that's kind of how I see moving between the big picture to the small picture. It's more of an art than a science. And I would say 3 times out of 10, I get it right. And the other 7, I'm probably somewhere in between and need to dive a little deeper into how I'm approaching something. And so the one lesson I've taken from bouldering is there's different levels of how you can boulder. They call them like B1, B2, B3, which is like beginner, intermediate, expert. And there was a period of time where I had become intermediate as a climber and would focus on the intermediate climbs. And I got some great advice that when it comes to climbing, sometimes you need to go back to beginner to understand how intermediate works. And so I would sometimes go back to the V1 climbs so that I could figure out how to solve those problems and then go back to an intermediate climb so that I could do that a little bit better, having the V1 experience in mind. And so when working through problems as an entrepreneur, sometimes going back to the basics is what needs to be done. And that might be at a technical level, or it might be at an operational level where you just need to understand how something works in a very simplified fashion. And then once you have that understanding, you can bring that to the bigger picture level where you have perhaps a big construction team you're working with multiple experts, and you need to determine how you're going to harmonize all of them together to work in a way that's efficient for the client or for whatever weather is coming down the path, whether it's a hurricane or a storm. And so being able to move between, that B1 beginner understanding of things to the expert level and know how they all work together and how important they all are is very important to being an entrepreneur from my perspective. And it's also important to remind myself to remain humble and to focus on simplicity. There is no reason to need to build solutions that are always experts, and building something that is simple for a client is 9 times out of 10 way better than building something that is overly complicated simply for the act of doing something complicated. And so that's how I kind of think about it. And for those of you who haven't bouldered, if you haven't yet, I highly recommend it. It's a ton of fun. And for those in the boulder community, I've always appreciated climbing and getting that feedback from the folks on the ground, whatever level I'm climbing.
Yeah, Jackie, gosh, dropping so many incredible analogies and visuals on us here today. As someone who loves a good analogy, I always argue that everything we do in life, whether it's chess, tennis, climbing, all of these things are just microcosms of life. I think business is also a microcosm of life. So I love that you take the time to reflect and see those bridges that can be drawn between all of these different facets of life and hobbies and fun and work and business, all that good stuff. So I love that. Your answer really reminds me of that Albert Einstein quote where he says, if you want to impress someone, make it complicated. If you want to help someone, make it simple. I so love that concept. Jackie, my final question of the day, it's really me giving the guests the hard part of the episode, which is summing up one piece of actionable advice. We talked about so many different perspectives here, from obviously inside your world of cybersecurity, launching and starting and growing a tech-based company, to we talked about leadership elements of how you manage between that zoom lens of zooming in and zooming out, all of these great things. But for listeners here today, what's the one thing you hope they walk away from this episode thinking and, more importantly, doing?
This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And so thanks for the great question. And I'm going to quote a brand name, Y Combinator. Yes, I am. I'm doing this. And just say, chase the upside and play to win. When I first started the company, I was so focused on playing to make sure that we didn't do anything wrong. And I have quickly shifted to just chase the upside, play to win, and keep moving conscientiously so. And really just that's what we're focused on. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you can give yourself a break and chase what is going well and keep doing that well, sometimes that's what makes the ultimate difference.
Boom. That is incredible advice. I love that that's what you chose to drop on us here at the end of today's show, Jackie. I also know, as you said, the entrepreneurial world is a small, tight-knit community where we're all rooting for each other's success. That's why one of the mottos behind our show is a rising tide lifts all boats. So I know that listeners are going to be keen to check out your business, SocialGrid, to follow along with your own journey. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here to learn more about SocialGrid as well as all the awesome work that you're up to?
Absolutely. So find us online at www.socialgrid.ai, and you'll see what we're working on there. We have a wait list, and we are looking for organizations to pilot our solution with and are happy to answer any questions. So reach out to us if anyone has any questions. As for the entrepreneurs the community here, if you ever want to just reach out, find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there, Jackie French, SocialGrid. Would love to talk. I post about security for startups pretty regularly, probably weekly now, just giving advice. And I'm always happy to have a one-on-one. I take it very seriously when it comes to helping the startup community, when it comes to security. And I want to make sure that this ecosystem is built in a way that makes it resilient, because I have been on the ground and seen what happens when we are all moving in silos. And right now, I think it's just so important, especially in the cybersecurity, emerging technology, climate spaces, for founders to be talking to each other, for entrepreneurs to be talking to each other. And I'm always happy to have a conversation. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and would love to hear from folks.
Yes, Jackie, you are so generous with your time and knowledge. Listeners, you know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find those links wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Scroll right on down and you'll find in the show notes a link to Jackie's business website, which is socialgrid.ai. You'll also find a link to Jackie's personal LinkedIn if you want to connect with her, even if it's just to say thank you. So many listeners are shy when it comes to reaching out to people, strangers that they hear on the internet coming through their headphones. So be one of those ones that reaches out, broaden your network. You've seen how generous Jackie is here today. So Jackie, on behalf of myself and the entire Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur audience, thanks so much for coming on to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you for having me.